We are back to the Management Diary, and today I'm taking you to the top university globally. If you've ever watched or gone through what we call the Times ranking of universities, then we are talking about the University of Oxford. And tonight we are talking to a Rhodes Scholar at the University of Oxford. Brendon is not just a scholar. He has accomplished a lot. He was a former MasterCard Foundation scholar. And so we are having double tips from a double scholar. He's also a 1+1 MSc candidate. We are going to talk more about what that means and what it also implies to you as a prospective applicant. As usual, this is what you should expect in this conversation. Of course, you're going to get all the information you need about the Rhodes Scholarship, where you're going to find the scholarship, and how you're going to make the application, including all the necessary documents. And this is going to be done by somebody who has already gone through the process, so you know how credible that information can be. Next, you're also going to find the information about life at the University of Oxford, everything to do with money, and his personal experiences and the prospects that exist with and for the scholars who are going to the University of Oxford. So, Brendon, when we say Oxford, we mean one of the top universities. How do you feel about it? I mean, how do you feel about being at the top university globally?
I think there might be a few people around the world who contest that statement. But yeah, it is an incredible university. Definitely one of the top out there. And it's obviously a great privilege to be a student here. I think, like you mentioned, being in this place gives you access to a great network of alumni and current students, people who have achieved a lot of things. And it feels like every day you are learning something new. So definitely very exciting. And I'm happy to share a lot more about my experience to your audience.
I had a recent conversation with a scholar who is just your neighbor in a close institution called Cambridge. I'm sure you know Cambridge. And
Right.
there's usually something he kept mentioning, that Cambridge used to scare him a lot. Before he could even make an application to Cambridge, he could think once, twice, thrice. When did you realize that you, as an individual, wanted to go to Oxford, and how did the Oxford dream come about?
Right. That's very relatable that you're describing this sense of you might not belong in an institution like this. And I think all of us have felt this way. I would have wanted to come to Oxford for my undergrad, actually. But I think at the time, just the word Oxford would just scare you away. And I didn't feel I was qualified enough. But I think as I was applying, as I was looking around the world to see where I would do my master's, I decided to just give it a shot and talked to a lot of people who've gone through the process who reassured me that you should give it a shot and there is a space for everyone. And that has been true from my experience. Looking around, I see that there's a lot of diversity here. And don't let the name scare you away. Just give it a shot, is my advice.
Yeah, that's impressive. These dreams usually come from a very early stage sometimes.
Right.
I mean, you start thinking about it from a very young age. And I don't know how it was like in your part, but then there's this young version of yourself when you are doing your bachelor's. Can you tell me more about this person? What this person was thinking and how this person prepared themselves to be able so that they can be at least a good candidate to get into Oxford?
All right. Um, so I think Oxford wasn't always on my mind that early on. I did my undergrad in Morocco at a liberal arts university called Akhawayn University. I was studying engineering and management science, and at the time, I envisioned going into renewable energy project development, more on the engineering division of things. But I think slowly, as I was going towards graduation, I realized I wanted to explore further what the industry has to offer, and I wanted to look at project development more from a broader perspective. So I was looking around the world at different universities that had masters that I thought were appropriate for what I was the trajectory my career was going in. And Oxford was so happened to be one of those places that is this master's that I'm doing right now. And there are quite a few other places that offer degrees in sustainability and management. You can think of Columbia, Stanford, etc. So for me, it was just having a bunch of options ready and deciding once the decisions came back from the schools, which one was the best fit. And thankfully, Oxford came through, and here I am.
So I'm aware you hold another scholarship from your background, but now that we are focusing on the Rhodes Scholarship, let's just get into it. What does Rhodes Scholarship mean to you, and what does it mean generally to another person?
So the Rhodes, at least the official definition, what it is, it's a postgraduate fully funded merit-based scholarship to the University of Oxford, which is offered to young people from across the world. I guess that's the official definition. That's pretty much what it is to me as well. It's an opportunity, like I said, to be at a place like Oxford, to study at one of the best institutions in the world, and to learn from people who are coming from a lot of diverse backgrounds as well. So it represents opportunity and access, and an opportunity again to grow and to learn from the people around you.
You know, you just mentioned merit-based, and I'm really thinking
Right.
about that. What do you mean when you say merit-based?
So merit-based, I think essentially it means what makes the decision is. Actually, let me walk back to some of the few criteria or divisions that scholarships are usually awarded. So the Mastercard Foundation Scholarship, which I was on for undergrad, it was a need-based scholarship. So that is, you're looking at the tuition based on your income. Can you afford to pay that? If not, the scholarship comes in to cover that balance. So those are need-based scholarships. There are quite a few options out there for people who think that's what they need. The Rhodes, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily look at funding in terms of if you can afford to go to the institution. But I think the focus is on merit and are you meeting the criteria that the scholarship states. We can always go into the criteria later. But I think the best resource is go to the website and see what is it that decides who gets the scholarship. And you realize financial need is not one of those things that are highlighted.
So I just listened to you, and I think I'm a prospect. I could potentially get into this program.
Right.
What else do I need so that I can be an ideal candidate for the program?
So ideally, you would be a person who covers the four main criteria of the Rhodes Scholarship. I need to consult my notes on this because I always try to remember them, but
Sure, sure.
it gets a bit complicated. So the first one is academic excellence, like I said, because it's a merit-based scholarship. You need to meet a certain threshold in terms of your grades in undergrad. If I remember correctly, for my constituency, Zimbabwe, you need an equivalent to a 3.7 out of 4 GPA, which I think is a first class in the British system. So that's the academic side of things. There are other criteria that are energy to use your talents to the full. So how are you doing or engaging in society outside of classes? Do you play sports? Are you in a band? Do you sing? Whatever it is that you're talented in, can you show consistency and that you have explored these talents in various ways? The other one is sympathy and protection of the weak and kindness and selfishness and fellowship. I'm looking at my notes here, by the way. Essentially, I think this is just talking about are you a person who cares about the people around you? And can you demonstrate that this is something you have been actively doing? And lastly, it's more a force of character and instinct to lead. Leadership is one of the highlights of the program. Whilst you're on the Rhodes Scholarship, you will be taken through some leadership seminars and training. And I think the goal is to develop leaders who eventually will go out in the world and effect change.
I had done another episode previously with Dorcas. She's also at Oxford,
Right.
but she's a DPhil candidate. You are a 1+1 master's candidate, and
Right.
both of you are on Oxford, are on the Rhodes Scholarship. So, how does this work? Who exactly is going into this program, and how do I differentiate between who is going where? Allow me to
Um,
interrupt this conversation and bring something to your attention. Since we launched this podcast a few months ago, we've had over 50,000 people watching our episodes, which we are very thankful for, and over 12,000 hours. However, we are currently trying to build our audience so that we can get the leverage to invite more guests to our podcast and we can continue bringing more insights. As you can see in one of these slides, and I bet that's here, at least 80.7% of the people watching our podcasts are not subscribers to this channel. And what we are currently focusing on is building our audience. So I'm requesting that if you may like to support us, if you like what we are sharing, you support our channel by clicking that subscribe button so that we can grow. Our promise is to continue bringing you strong guests with more insights so that we can bring these conversations where you are.
so that's completely up to you. The Rhodes Scholarship, in as far as I know, uh, it covers the first 2 years of your education here at Oxford, whether it is a DPhil or a PhD, or it's a master's program. Most master's programs in Oxford are 1 year programs. So that means for those 2 years, you probably have to do two different programs, which is what I'm doing. I did a master's in sustainability enterprise environment for my first year, and I will be doing the MBA in my second year. So that's what most scholars end up doing, combining two masters. But also, like I said, there is the option of doing a DPhil, which can be anywhere up to 4 years. But I think you can do it in less. So at the end of the day, it's about what you think is the right fit for you. You could do an MPhil, which is one program that takes 2 years. But I think whilst you're applying to the scholarship and whilst you're looking at what Oxford offers, most people find that there is something there for you that's appropriate.
We want to learn from your experience directly on how you as a person did it. So I think it would be nice for me to try and get it from you, how you did it as a person. So you did an application to two master's programs. One was in sustainability and another one was an MBA. So I'm thinking of applying for a Rhodes Scholarship this year. So we are recording this conversation on the April of 2025, but probably you are listening to this conversation some years later. But then, whatever choice you're making, you want to either apply for the masters and still apply for the scholarship. How do I work around this? Which comes first, and how do I work around these two?
Right. That's a great question. And I think it's one that a lot of people try to figure out whilst they're going through this process. I always encourage people who ask to think of the two as separate conversations, separate applications. Whilst also they're integrated in that you should have an idea of what you want to study at Oxford before you apply for the Rhodes. Personally, and that's a personal opinion, like everything I'm saying, by the way, is based on my own experience. But I think in my experience, I wanted to come to Oxford. I wanted to be on this program that I'm on before I realized that I had the option of the Rhodes Scholarship. So the Rhodes Scholarship, again, is just one of so many other scholarships that are offered at this university. So whilst the scholarship applications open earlier, part of the application asks you to talk about what you envision studying at Oxford, which is why you have to think of those two at the same time. The application, at least for my constituency, Zimbabwe, opens in June. And I think final submission by August. I started thinking about it around the same time in June. It was a year before my graduation from undergrad. I was thinking about my options the year after graduation. And that's when I came across the Masters in Sustainability and the Masters in Energy Systems. I was debating between those two programs, wasn't sure what was the best fit for me. And then in learning more about ways to fund this education, I came across the Rhodes Scholarship. And one thing I'll say is the website has any information that you need. Always go to the Rhodes website and do a very specific search as to what is needed for your constituency because it varies. We can go into more detail later to see how some of that looks, at least from my experience. But I think once you go through that scholarship stage and you have been successful in your application, you can then start thinking about applying to a specific program. And this is around, I'll say November, December, because the applications close in early January. So that's pretty much what the process looks like from a very broad perspective.
Now, I want us to dissect this in as much details as possible.
Right.
But now, for us to be able to dissect it, first we need to understand what a constituency is.
Constituency basically, I think you can think of it as the country you're from. In most cases, a constituency is one country, but there are a few cases where it's just a bunch of, I think Namibia, South Africa, and Botswana, if I'm not mistaken, count as one constituency. The history of it goes back to the founding of the scholarship and some of the ways that they decided on splitting the different like countries and how people from those countries would be awarded. But I think eventually it has slowly come to a point where a lot more constituencies have been added. So new countries now have access to that scholarship. But there's also a global scholarship, which is open to everyone who might not be covered in those country-specific opportunities. So you really shouldn't let the existence of a constituency for your country stop you from applying. Everyone is eligible as long as you meet the other requirements.
So it means now that I know my constituency, or at least I know I can make an application to the global one, then now I need to sit down and start figuring out what to send where. So that means the application process. Can you talk me through the application process in black and white? So how did you start the application process as an individual? Where did you start?
So the best place to start would be with your personal statement. I think personally that is the core of your argument as to why you should become a Rhodes Scholar. But that's only one piece of a journey that takes probably around 6 months in my case. So you submit in the first round a personal statement, academic statement, and a lot of accompanying documents. You can think of your CV, a 2-page CV, 4 recommendations letter in my constituency's case, transcripts from a university, and all other documents that they require to prove that you meet the basic criteria. There's also an age limit for most constituencies. I believe it's 24, if I'm not mistaken. So once you know that you've met that basic criteria and you've put together all your documents, you submit for the first round, which is, I think, the 1st of August in some constituencies. And then after that, you wait a few months. I think it was 3 months in my case, before you are invited to the interview stage. The interview is broken into 2 processes. There is a kind of a social engagement before you go to a formal interview.
So I'll cut you short.
Right.
So
No worries.
there's something I really need us to dissect properly.
Right.
So you said you need 4 referees, right?
Right.
How do you go about the selection of referees? Who is ideal to be your reference, first of all?
So the guideline emphasizes that you need people who can speak to your academic profile, but also to who you are as a person outside of class. I think the split is you need at least three academic references. I personally had three professors of mine from my university speak to who I am as a student and some of the work that I did at the university in research and just general engagement in the student community. And then outside of that, I had another referee speak to my professional experience. So the reference was emphasizing the work that I had done with the UN affiliated organization and just discussing what that looks like in terms of engagement in community as well. So essentially, you want to paint a picture, a very broad picture of who you are as a person inside of class and outside, and how that fits into that narrative. Always thinking about those four qualities that are emphasized for Rhodes Scholars.
Are there
So
any
that's it
language
for the
requirements?
language requirements, I believe the references have to be in English, but I think I'm not quite sure if that varies by constituencies. I know in the case of Zimbabwe, that is the requirement.
And
Again, I always remind applicants to check with the website to make sure that they're sending in the right documents.
yeah, and on an individual level, did you submit a proof of language proficiency at the application stage for the scholarship?
No, I wasn't required to because I was at an English university, so that wasn't necessary. But I think in some cases, people do have to submit some tests, especially because for admission into the actual program at Oxford, you would need to provide the test results anyways.
All right, I think that is clear.
All right.
Because language is one of the things that sometimes becomes an obstacle to most applicants. So when you are making this application to Rhodes, we have not even started talking about the university application yet, I believe.
All right.
You mentioned that you are submitting a personal statement. What is a personal statement, and how do I go about writing a good one, in your experience?
Ooh, that's the hardest question you've asked so far. A personal statement, I think it looks different to everyone. One thing that I did is I've talked to a lot of Rhodes scholars, and we've had these conversations around what did you write and how did you choose to represent yourself. And I think essentially what you're trying to do is to show those four qualities that we highlighted at the beginning, those qualities that the Rhodes Trust is looking for, but also acknowledging that no one person can always be all those things. So personally, my journey was a lot of introspection. It took me, I believe, just over 3 months to write the final version of my personal statement. I was stuck for a very long time because I simply did not know if I was striking the right chord. It's a process that involves really digging deep and understanding who you are as a person, which is why I always encourage people apply anyways, even if you don't think you have a chance of getting in. Just the process of writing this personal statement, you will discover a lot about yourself. And that's exactly what it was for me. Eventually, after 3 months, I figured out my story. I came to terms with the fact that, you know what, I'm not a finished product. There's so many things about the typical Rhodes Scholar that I might not have. But I've been on a journey to try and develop so many other things that I think I lack. And being in Oxford and being a Rhodes Scholar give me the opportunity to become the person that I think my community needs. So that's what the process looked like for me. And I was very vulnerable. I was very honest in my statement. I, openly said, these are my weaknesses. These are the things I need to work on. These are my strengths. This is why I think you should pick me. And I think that's essentially the argument you're trying to make in a personal statement.
I was saying, I've just gotten a quote from you, and I think I will make this a popular quote once we are done with this conversation. That on this day, Brendon said that a personal statement actually helps you discover yourself more than you think. And that thing makes a lot of sense, because just ask somebody who they are, and you will see actually they will take a lot of time to think, actually, who am I?
Right.
Because now this personal statement gives you an opportunity to first think where you've been, right? Where you want to be, and what that looks like in the future. And I think some of these things probably they contribute a lot to how your application will be viewed. Of course, there are other things that support this application that we have just talked about. And what comes just after that is what you mentioned. I think I cut you short at that point. You were telling me about the interviews. When did you receive an invitation for your interview?
So I don't remember the exact moment
Mhm.
that I received the news, but it should have been around September because the interviews were in November. I honestly did not expect that I would be invited for the interviews. I think if you look at the history of the scholarship in my constituency, Zimbabwe, there are a lot of very accomplished people that I've always looked up to. And it was an honor to simply receive that invitation and be one of those 10 people who get to travel for the interview in Harare. It is 10 in my constituency. I know that varies depending on where you're coming from across the world. But once you get that interview, it usually comes a few weeks before the first engagement is due, and that gives you time to arrange your travel. The interview is done in your home country, and for the first part of it, it's a two-part process. The first part is a social engagement where you get to meet the other applicants. You get to talk to them, figure out who's in the room, but also rub shoulders with very high-profile people that you've always looked up to. In the context of Zimbabwe, we had a former prime minister in the room who is a Rhodes Scholar, a lot of accomplished doctors and business people. And all these people are very curious. They want to learn about you. They're in that room to talk to you and to figure out, if you can have a relationship and if that can translate to a Rhodes Scholarship. But I think the in terms of a mindset to approach this, I think you should think of it as an opportunity to get to know people. It might not lead to the scholarship, but you definitely leave that room with feeling like a different person because you would have learned a lot of important skills. So the social engagement takes happens the night before the interview, at least in the case of Zimbabwe, and it's about 2 hours with light snacks and drinks. It's a very relaxed atmosphere. It's a time for you to show your personality, to laugh. Feel free to be who you are and to show the side of you that doesn't necessarily come out in the formal interview. The next day is when you have to go through the I guess the formal interview that would come into mind when you hear the word interview. You're sitting in front of a panel of 10 or so people. It can be intimidating. To be honest, I think before I walked into that room, I was a little nervous about being in front of that many people who've achieved so much. And I think the key is to keep calm and to just believe you have something to contribute to the conversation. And think of it as a conversation. It's not an interrogation. And yeah, it was honestly a very rewarding experience for me. I came out of it feeling, even if I did not get the scholarship, I I spoke from my heart. Everything that I said, I was proud of the opinions that I expressed. And I think at the end of the day, that's the whole point. Like I said, it's a process of self-discovery. You come out of it knowing some opinions that you didn't even know you hold. But when you're in that seat and people are asking you questions, you get to learn a lot about yourself.
I'm following a story and I'm wondering, where does now the application to Oxford come in? So this is you at the interview point,
Right.
and it sounds more like at a group conversation with people who have been through that experience before. They're trying to help you see yourself in a different way, right? Now,
Mhm.
you've had this conversation and you come out of the interview. Let's just call it for what it's called, the interview.
Right.
And then after that, what happens? And how do you now start transitioning from this Rhodes application process to the university application?
Right. So the transition happens as soon as you are out of the interview process. The results are announced on the same day in my constituency. So that same day you have your interview, you go back home knowing Yeah, and that's a bit scary, but you have a few other people around you. There were 10 finalists my year, and we're all together in one room, just thinking about the process and hoping that we made it. But you will get to know whether you're a Rhodes Scholar or not that day. And as soon as you get that news, it's a shift from applying to the scholarship to applying to Oxford. You get a lot of support in terms of resources from the Rhodes Trust itself. A lot of the alumni and current students will be willing to talk to you about the process to help you understand. And one thing to appreciate is that applying and getting the Rhodes Scholarship does not necessarily translate to getting into Oxford. There are cases where you have the scholarship, but you don't actually get the course if it's not a good fit for you. So it's very important to make sure that you choose a course that's a good fit, and you put the same rigor into the Oxford application as you did in the scholarship application. But obviously, that it takes a lot of pressure off because you're not thinking about funding. Now it's about really expressing in your academic statement, this is why I want to do this course, and this is why it's important. This is why it has to be in Oxford. But like I said, the Rhodes Trust will be very supportive in that process, and there are always people willing to talk to you and to guide you through it. Applications between knowing your status with a scholarship and submitting your Oxford application, I believe that's about 2 or 3 months. So you have time to work on your essays, to get your transcripts together, which you already would have done for the scholarship. So I found that process much easier. What's harder is the wait. So when you wait between submitting your application and knowing if you actually got to Oxford, it's obviously I was very nervous because I was quite excited with for the prospect of going to Oxford, but you don't actually know if you'll go. That it's a bit of a long wait, but when you get the news, I think it was a very special moment for me.
That aspect of receiving the feedback on the same
Right.
exact day, it's both relieving and very scary at the same
Yeah.
time. Because, but
I know
then,
what you mean.
yeah. So now it makes me even more curious
Mm.
because we've just talked about the whole scholarship application and we've talked about every single document that somebody needs to submit. I'm trying to avoid repetition.
Right.
Is there something different that you submit from those documents to Oxford that is not there in your okay, like is there another new document you may be required to submit to Oxford that was not there at the application stage?
That's a very good question, and I would need to go back to my application material to pick out one actual document. But if I remember correctly, most of the documents you would have submitted for the roads, you can use for your Oxford application. You would obviously need to ask your recommenders, for example, to change the fact that you're applying for a scholarship to the fact that you're applying for a specific program and to speak to your qualification for that program. That's one thing you need to do. Make sure your recommenders know they would need to translate those recommendations into a program application. For some people, you would have graduated from college, so you now have a final transcript instead of a draft or an unofficial transcript. So you need to provide that. I think Oxford eventually asks for official transcripts, anyways. So all you need to do is just to make sure that you have up-to-date documents. Your academic statement would need to be updated, obviously reflecting if there's been any change in the way you've been thinking about the program, or you think it's more appropriate to rephrase it for applying to the program as opposed to a scholarship. But I think you would have done a lot of the heavy lifting during the scholarship application. Absolutely.
Just
What?
you applied to 1+1 masters. I'm still stuck there. So how did this application go now? Because you applied to two different masters at the same application. How did it work? Because I
Right.
know when you're applying for one masters, that's just one masters. Apply, it's done. How did this case
So
work for you?
let me clarify that the Side Business School has an official 1+1 program where you actually apply for both a master's and the MBA. And then you can, the other option is to or do the MBA. Those are completely different processes. What I did was I applied for an MSc, which is what I'm doing right now, separately, and then applied for my MBA whilst I was here at Oxford already. So I'm not on the official 1+1 track, but I'm combining a master's with an MBA. And the way I went about it, I applied for this master's in sustainability enterprise environment before like, as soon as I got news that I had the scholarship, the Rhodes would fund a couple of applications so that in case you're not successful in one of them, then you can always have an alternative. I applied to two programs, energy systems and sustainability. I felt that the sustainability program was a better fit for me. So that's how I ended up on this program. And late last year to early this year is when I started thinking about the second program that I felt was a good complement to what I was studying. And the MBA was the obvious choice for me. I felt that, having access to the business school and learning a bit more from the corporate side to combine that with sustainability and seeing what those two, the way that they interact and what that looks like. I applied for the MBA, and the final round gets notified around mid-April. So I've only realized or been accepted in the MBA, and those are the two programs that I'll be doing here at Oxford. But Rhodes Scholars take all sorts of different parts. There are people who do MPhils, that's a 2-year program. There are people who do DPhils, which can go all the way up to 4 years. There are people who do an MSc in the first year and do a DPhil. So you can take up to 5 years in Oxford. There are so many other ways to combine this.
Now, I'm looking at you. This young gentleman, is waiting for a feedback. Of course, he knows he has an offer for a scholarship. But now he's waiting for the last message. And that last message is a message from the university, which will actually confirm that this whole process is now a realized dream. The offer from Oxford. Do you remember when you received that offer? Where were you? What were you doing?
Where was I? That's probably a memory that I should have kept because I remember how nervous I was before I got that news. But I think, like I said, I was still in undergrad. So it was a very busy time when I was working on my dissertation. I still had assignments. And I managed to keep myself distracted enough to not overthink about getting accepted into Oxford or not. But I remember when I got the news, it was, very much welcome. And I was quite excited to be accepted into both programs I applied to. And I at least had the option to decide what I thought was the best fit for me. But yeah, again, I think it speaks to the fact that whilst you would have gotten the scholarship, you need to be intentional about providing a strong application to the master's program, whatever program it is you're applying to Oxford. Oxford is still quite a competitive university. And there are people on so many other different scholarships, people who are competing for the same spots. And again, you need to be sure that it's the right fit for you.
So, who was the first person to know? Who was this special person to know?
My mom, obviously, always. I called my mom as soon as I got the email. My family was so excited. I think they were a lot more nervous than I was. But I told them, hey, I tried to reassure them, it's fine. Let's just be patient and see what happens. And yeah, thankfully, the responses came through positive. Yeah, I got my offer to Oxford.
When we say a scholarship, there are a lot of ways people look at scholarships.
Right.
But sometimes I usually say it is an opportunity for you to do those studies, pursue your dream without ever worrying about the associated expenses and meeting all those. Like you just have the opportunity to sit and focus on whatever you're supposed to do. That brings in a very interesting subject, which most will be interested in, the money aspect of the scholarship. So you say, and at least it's known that Rhodes Scholarship, besides being prestigious, it is fully funded.
Right.
What do we mean when we say Rhodes is a fully funded scholarship?
So fully funded essentially means all your expenses are covered. So that means the tuition for the program you're studying, the college expenses, which would include accommodation and other payments that you need to make to the colleges. Well, I don't know if your audience would probably be familiar with the Oxford system and how there are colleges in addition to departments. So each student belongs to a college which takes care of your accommodation and your day-to-day needs, but tuition is paid to the department. Those are the two main costs that a student at Oxford would incur. But there are also other personal expenses which are covered by a stipend. And I think those three would be what constitutes a fully funded scholarship.
So I'd prefer we break down this finance aspect
Right.
so that somebody, one, does not come underprepared, and two, does not come with too much expectations. So I'd rather be prudent. So let's look at don't come underprepared. So
Right.
I'm going to receive stipends. I don't know how frequent these stipends are. Is it on a monthly basis, bi-weekly, or half yearly?
Right. So just to walk back to, I guess, the purpose of the stipend, like I said, is to cover your day-to-day expenses that any ordinary student at Oxford would face. And most of that would probably be your accommodation. So a lot of that is going to your rent. In my college, I pay rent monthly. And the stipend is also paid monthly, and you're taking out your rent, your food expenses, whatever it is that you need to pay on a day-to-day basis out of that monthly stipend. So I think that's how it works for pretty much all or most Rhodes scholars. But I obviously there's always room for flexibility if the need arises. But I would say most people in Oxford, most scholars just find that what they have is sufficient to cover most of their costs.
Yeah, I'm at Oxford, so I want to live a good life. Come on. I want to live the Oxford dream.
Right.
Oxford is a good university. And when I come to Oxford, there are things I expect. One of them is probably I'm going to get this very nice, fancy place to live in. But then I'm going to pay money for it.
Right.
What proportion of my stipend would this nice, fancy place take?
Well, that completely depends on how fancy you want to live. Like you said, when you're coming to Oxford, you have a vision of what I guess what that looks like to you. There's a lot of there are a lot of ranges of accommodation or tiers, as my college puts it, and it's completely up to you how much you pay. So there are I believe the range right now is from as low as £700 to up to £1.2, depending on the type of accommodation you've chosen. Personally, I spend less than half of a stipend on rent, but I know that that's different from a lot of people. Depending on what accommodation you've chosen, if you're living with other people, if you're living outside of college accommodation. But yeah, again, it's all in your hands. You have the money in your bank. You decide how you're going to spend it.
So while you were in Zim preparing to come,
Right.
who arranged for this accommodation? Is there a binding contract between you and the person on the other side who you are paying rent?
So thankfully, in my case, and in the case of most first-year grad students, I believe colleges will go out of their way to make sure that you have accommodation with them. So the Oxford colleges have on-site accommodation, and some have houses just distributed around the city. And most people end up being in college accommodation. But there are also there are options to rent outside of college accommodation if that's something you feel you need. I've realized that most people like to live in Cowley, which is where I guess the younger population is in Oxford. That's usually outside of college accommodation, and you have that option to live there. But most people don't really find it difficult to get accommodation arranged. It's Everyone is working to help you. The Rhodes Trust itself will obviously be looking to make sure that you have something arranged.
So I'm going by your words. You said first year students. That's college freshmen.
Right. No, not freshmen in the undergrad sense,
Yeah.
but people who are on their first master's or the first year of a DPhil,
Okay.
etc. So most people, like I said, end up spending more than 2 years at Oxford. So in your first year, you're guaranteed accommodation.
And the second year, what
But
happens?
some colleges would ask you to find accommodation outside of their grounds. Some colleges offer accommodation throughout. But really, I'm yet to come across someone who fails to find anywhere to live in Oxford. I think there are always so many options.
So I have paid my rent. In your case, it's 50% of my stipend.
Right.
Now I have this 50%. In your opinion, I know people want to live different lifestyles. And guys, let me just address you directly. You will choose the lifestyle you want to live, but at least this lifestyle comes at a cost. So whatever we are going to say here is based on his personal experiences. But then, if you want to know more, just go online, create a basket of something, of the things you'd expect by the month, and of course, you'll have your entire monthly budget. But then, in the case of our guest, so is this money enough for you to live off a good, comfortable student life, and at the same time, at least have some extra for things like leisure and such?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I think you put it really perfectly. It's all in your hands, and you decide how you want to live. But I think for most people, who the most basic needs are what accommodation and food, a bit of travel every now and again, entertainment. Um, you will find that your stipend covers most of it. And for people who want to do more, there's always the option to earn money outside of a stipend. So yeah, I don't think it should be your main concern. Personally, I think the privilege of being on a scholarship is the fact that it's taking that stress of trying to figure out finances out of your hands, and you get to focus on what matters, which is you're in Oxford, you're in an academic institution with so much to learn. And I think a lot of people find that they have more than enough to go on a day-to-day basis.
You just said the option to earn more, and you got me smiling because now I know I'm going to buy a Ferrari. Tell me about
Go
this
for it.
option to work. What does it mean,
Right.
and what restrictions exist?
As you know, on the UK student visa, there is the option to work 20 hours per week, which is a lot of people I know have taken up that option. And there are so many different jobs you can take up in a city like Oxford, but across the UK as well. The university itself offers research positions. So most students on a master's or DPhil program would probably get notices about open research assistantships around the university. You could also work for the colleges themselves as a junior dean if you're looking out for the affairs of other students in your college. And yeah, there just is so many diverse opportunities out there. Pretty much everyone I know is working some kind of job. So if that is something that you think you can handle, alongside your studies, alongside everything else you're committed to, I'll say always keep your eyes open. Always be listening out for opportunities. There's always something available for everyone.
You mentioned a visa, and you mentioned that there are provisions in a visa, and then that got me
Right.
thinking, okay, actually, as an international student, you need a visa.
Right.
For you to come to the UK and study, you need a student visa. Who arranged for this visa and who paid for it?
Fortunately, the Rhodes Scholarship covers the expenses incurred with the visa application as well as travel to the UK. So as soon as you get notified that you've been accepted into Oxford, You get, I think it's a confirmation of status from your university. So it's a document that's basically saying, yes, you have been admitted to Oxford and you're welcome to start studying there. Once you get that document, alongside your funding documents from the scholarship that you're on, you can then apply to through the embassy in your country. That process, I think it took me less than a month. It was quite easy in Zimbabwe to go through that. And you have alumni from your country who've gone through the same process who are always willing to guide you through it. And the Rhodes Trust has guidelines in place to help you figure out the visa process.
So there's a document called the CAS, Confirmation of Acceptance of Studies.
Right.
Once you received your CAS, how did you go about the application? I know these applications usually vary from one country to another. And this is a case specific to him. But then at least there's always something you can learn from one person's experience, considering that we are all applying to the same country, although from different destinations. But then now you received your CS or CAS.
Mm-hmm.
And this CAS simply tells that now this person is coming to Oxford and they will be funded by Rhodes, and this is the duration of their program. So if possible, please provide them with a visa so that they come, right? So how did you go about this whole process? Did you attend an interview? How long did you... Okay, I think you mentioned the duration, but then did you attend an interview and how did it go?
Yeah, I'll try and remember the exact details of that process because it's been a while. But like you said, like, once you get that confirmation, you get your documents together. I think the most important is like you said, that CAS and the funding letter from your scholarship. In my case, the Rhodes Scholarship. I think obviously you have your passport and your identification documents. You submit those online. You get invited to drop off your passport, and if I remember correctly, there was a brief interview in Harare at the time where I was, where you just walk them through why you're applying and where you're going. A lot of it would have been already stated in your documents. And then in a few weeks, I think maybe 3 weeks after you drop off your passport and all your documents, you get called back to collect your passport, which would have the visa stamped in there, which allows you to travel to the UK. I think ASAP.
I'm just thinking about you traveling to the UK. The good thing is this was not your first time abroad.
Right.
Okay, let's begin from the first step before we even start talking about your journey abroad. You got your air ticket from Rhodes, is it?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, you do get support to purchase an air ticket. If I'm trying to remember if I bought it myself or they give you the ticket directly. But I think you get to choose when you want to travel. So that's completely up to you as long as it's before the course starts. So once you get that ticket, which is funded by the scholarship, you can travel to the UK.
So tell me about this first day. Where did you first leave Zim? Were you in Zim when you were leaving?
Yeah, I was. I left from Zim.
So what was the experience like on this first day? Like you are leaving Zim again for the second time because you were out there doing your masters elsewhere. How was this experience like?
Ooh, man. I don't know. I'm trying to remember the exact details. It's been a while. It's a bit fuzzy. But obviously there was definitely excitement there. I've been like right now we've described the process from June the year before when you send in your applications, up to the September in the next year when you're finally at a place where you're saying, okay, I'm going to Oxford now. So it was a very long wait. I really much was looking forward to being in Oxford. Yeah, I was quite excited to go on a new adventure at the time.
So this is you at Oxford. The year is 2024, right? September. And you land. It is obviously autumn. Is it? Yeah, I think so.
I guess so. Yeah.
It
I'm not quite sure how the UK season works
it
yet.
was the month of October. Is it October, right?
Yeah, October.
So
No, I arrived in September actually, mid-September.
where did you land? Was it Heathrow? Was it there's Luton and
Heathrow.
there's another one.
Right. No, I landed in Heathrow.
So who were you picked from Heathrow, or how did you get to the university?
So that's an option. Again, the Rhodes Trust is very supportive with this process of your first time arriving to the UK. You can ask to have someone come collect you, especially some of the upper year scholars are always willing to volunteer to come to Heathrow to get newer scholars coming into the UK for the first time. I think I personally wanted to challenge myself, have a bit of an experience, a bit of an adventure, and I decided to find my own way. So it was just arriving, trying to figure out how this country works, how to get your phone line working, how to get tickets for travel. And yeah, I had fun with it. I remember just obviously trying to figure out the trains and how any of it works. But yeah, I made it to Oxford eventually. What I remember is that I came on the worst possible day because if you might remember that there was a flood in September last year, and that's the exact same day I arrived in Oxford. So it was raining. I was just carrying these bags around. It was a bit of a mess. But I think the weather has improved from there, and yeah, I'm grateful for the experience. It was an interesting welcome to the UK moment.
Yeah, that sounds like a nice one, except for winter. I don't know how you
Right.
experienced during and through winter. Having to live again. At least I don't know. I don't want to take it lightly, but you had another experience living away from your family and friends. But then
Mhm.
this is another completely different environment, different seasons. How did it go with you?
It was very hard, honestly. And you're in Scotland, so you know how terrible this weather
Yeah.
gets. I've heard people talk about British weather and how bad it gets, but until you've experienced it yourself, honestly, you don't really understand. And yeah, that December, especially December, when the sun sets quite early around like 5 p.m., I think, and you're hardly seeing daylight. I think that was quite a period of adjustment. But I mean, there are ways you can deal with that. Just try and get the vitamins and try and socialize, get out of your room, because it's very important to stay engaged and trying to lift your mood around that time.
Speaking about social life, I know Rhodes is a very big community. At
Right.
least you have current scholars and scholars who are already in their other years, like second year, third
Mhm.
year. Do you guys get to meet and have these community events where you guys get to share ideas and such kind of what kind of support do you get as Rhodes scholars besides financial and academic?
Right. Yeah. So really I think the essence of the Rhodes community is being around the people and like you said, learning from scholars from different years. That's the emphasis of the program, and they're always trying to get you to get together with other scholars. As soon as you arrive, there is a sort of an induction weekend for African students, because usually African students come in a lot earlier than other people. You get to meet other people from across the continent. You share your adventures and how you got there and how you found it so far. So it was very easy to find community quite early on. But again, it's a much bigger group once all the other Rhodes scholars come in. You get to meet people from across the world and learn a bit more about them. And yeah, it's been a quite exciting opportunity. It's a very diverse group, and you meet amazing people who you wouldn't have come across, if you were not on like on this opportunity. So really appreciate having that group around me.
Hmm.
But again, community in Oxford goes beyond the Rhodes community. There, your classmates, people in your departments, people in your colleges, and really it's about learning how to juggle all those different commitments and making sure that you're taking the most out of the place you're in.
I'm looking at you and I'm trying to read your mind unsuccessfully. What next? What next after Rhodes?
Well, that is the $1 million question. I think I've taken this journey as a period of self-discovery. So, besides just the fact that you're obviously on an academic journey, you're a student at the end of the day. I'm also trying to figure out how can I be the most impactful person I can be after this. I think like we talked about this before. I'm a social entrepreneur, and one thing I came into this whole program thinking was, how do I grow my impact? How do I scale the work that I'm doing, tackling energy poverty in Zimbabwe? And that's an answer that I'm still trying to figure out. There are obviously opportunities in Oxford to fund startups if that's what you're interested in. For people who are more career oriented and you are trying to get into the right job networks, those opportunities available as well. But I think it's really important to keep an open mind and to just learn from the people around you and try and go with the flow, see where it takes you. Who knows after the MBA what I'll be considering. But for now, again, I'm an energy engineer and I want to stay in the industry and I want to see how I can be more impactful to drive the energy transition in Africa.
I've listened to you for at least 60 minutes because at least we had a conversation even before the podcast. And I'm looking at you and I'm looking at Brendon, and this gentleman is headed for great stuff. And I want to see you grow as a person. I want to see your journey as you grow, and maybe in future I would like also to engage more with you, both on a personal and business level, as well as. But then now, maybe I'm also a listener on this other end. How can I do that? How can I reach you?
So the easiest way to reach me is through LinkedIn. I always try to keep up with messages. And I think already because the Rhodes application season is about to open, people are already starting to reach out and asking questions around, how do I work on my personal statement? Where do I begin, etc. And I always encourage everyone who's going through this process, feel free to reach out to me through LinkedIn. Brendon Munashe Mahere is the name. It's the name I use online. And yeah, I'm always open to help in any way that I can. Feel free to reach out.
Yeah, we will leave the link to his profile at the description of this video. So in case you want to reach out to him, and in case you want more information about the Rhodes Scholarship, just check the description of this video. Now, Brendon, as a prospect, having heard from you, what message do you have for me?
For you and for your listeners, I think within the theme of the Rhodes Scholarship and applying to Oxford, I just want to say, if you'd asked me 2 years ago if I'll be in this place, I would have told you highly unlikely. And I think that's true for a lot of people that get intimidated by the name. And my advice is just give it a shot. If you don't get into the scholarship or into Oxford, you will come out of it with a better sense of who you are as a person and what's a good fit for you. A lot of people who I went through the application process with, who might not have ended up here, still went on to do amazing things at different universities within their careers. So my advice is don't shy away from applying for some of these opportunities across the world, especially for your students or your audience in Africa. There are so many opportunities for African students, and we just need to give it a shot, keep asking questions, listen to this podcast because it's an incredible resource for everyone who's trying to figure out what to do next. And yeah, keep engaged.
I won't dilute it even more, so I'll just leave it at that and say that was Brendon Munashe Mahere, and this is the Management Diary. I'm your host, Omai Joseph, and until we meet again in the next episode, bye-bye.